The Intercept has published a new report showing Dr. Anthony Fauci lied to Congress and that the NIAID was providing funding for gain-of-function research. Rand Paul has come out recently saying, this is it. We knew he lied. And this would mean that we have evidence Anthony Fauci committed perjury by lying before Congress when he appeared at a hearing and said that they did not provide funding for gain-of-function research. Now, when Rand Paul challenged Dr. Fauci, saying, here is a study from 2017 which says you were manipulating viruses to make them more infectious, you were creating chimeric viruses, that is gain-of-function research. And the study says it received funding from EcoHealth Alliance and the NIH. Fauci said up and down the chain that was determined not to be gain-of-function research. So perhaps people are now questioning whether or not he intentionally misled Congress. And I think based off these documents, which map out the whole process to how the research was done, proves Fauci lied. Now, of course, some of those involved in this story, the actual experts, the biology professors, the chemistry professors, are saying, well, he was being untruthful, but here we are. I wonder now, will there be a criminal referral? And I have to say, probably not. Because up and down the chain, you can see from the establishment, political infrastructure to the media, the lies persisted and they will persist. But the challenge here is the Intercept, not a right-wing publication. In fact, quite a bit of a left-wing pro-establishment publication are the ones who came out with this information showing these documents, 900 pages, which prove Dr. Fauci lied. Perhaps this will be the dam that breaks, that finally unleashes the wave of accountability. But I'm not entirely convinced, because we have seen evidence before that Fauci lied. We have seen multiple hearings over this. Rand Paul, who is a doctor, I might add, also submitted a criminal referral for Fauci, and nothing ever happens. Why should it now? But of course, we are seeing the after effects of the lies. The repeated misinformation by people like Fauci, a new viral video showing Fauci flip-flop back and forth throughout the past 2 years almost about what we should or shouldn't be doing during the pandemic. And now we're getting reports from the CDC which say that 80% of people have some level of immunity. But here we are still hearing about an escalation of cases, hearing about a need to lock down, hearing about booster shots and twice daily pills. Why? Well, in my opinion, as much as COVID is serious and really nasty, I mean, Joe Rogan just got it, said he felt really bad. I think we have to learn to understand. We have to understand what this means for us moving forward, that we can choose to hide under a rock, or we can accept that there is a virus. We are building up immunity to it, and it's going to be bad and probably continue to be bad, but it's going to be something we live with. And if people would like, they can choose to get a vaccine to protect themselves, same as they do with other illnesses, though long COVID is fairly serious. Ultimately, it comes down to the individual's choice. We're not getting that, though. Federal buildings still mandate masks. We're still seeing a rise in COVID restrictions. We're still seeing fear mongering. And over in Australia, they've plumb lost their minds, building camps for people. Now, of course, there are those who would criticize me for daring to say that what Australia is doing is building concentration camps, but that's what they're doing. You know, people don't understand history. They think that despots come out and just say, oh, by the way, we're going to build camps, put people in, and then, end their lives. No, they build the camps for specific reasons and then end up shuffling people in these directions. In a new viral video, there's one man saying that we're all sitting here waiting to be fed. That's right. You eat what you're given. These camps they're building in Australia go above and beyond what we ever would have expected to see in any free Western nation. But of course, here it is. And of course, there are people defending it saying, oh, it's just for travelers. It's just 15 days. It's just one mask. It's just 2 masks. It's just a vaccine. It's just a booster shot. It's just a booster every 5 months. It's just a twice daily pill. It's just a quarantine camp for those who are traveling. It's just a camp for those suspected of having COVID. It's just for those who break quarantine, just like we see in those nightmare dystopian novels and movies. But let's take a look at this report. Take a look at how the media handled it, and take a look at what Rand Paul is saying. new details emerge about coronavirus research at Chinese lab. More than 900 pages of materials related to U.S.-funded coronavirus research in China were released following a FOIA lawsuit by The Intercept. Now, before we get started, head over to timcast.com. Become a member in order to get an ad-free experience and support our fierce and independent journalists. And you'll get access to our members area with exclusive podcasts and more content to come that you can't get anywhere else. But don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. Now let's read this story. The Intercept reports, and I got to add, The Intercept doesn't seem to have wanted this news to be the case. Glenn Greenwald points out in a series of tweets that it seems like they were trying to debunk the narrative of the gain-of-function research in Wuhan, but instead, the FOIA documents actually prove it. Now, the reason I say Glenn Greenwald's probably correct is that they don't get to the meat and potatoes in this article. It takes one of the experts involved in the publication coming out and saying what we all know to get the point across. Fauci lied to Congress. The Intercept reports, newly released documents provide details of U.S.-funded research on several types of coronaviruses at the Wuhan Institute of Virology in China. The Intercept has obtained more than 900 pages of documents detailing the work of the EcoHealth Alliance, a U.S.-based health organization that used federal money to fund bat coronavirus research at the Chinese laboratory. The trove of documents includes 2 previously unpublished grant proposals that were funded by the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, as well as project updates relating to the EcoHealth Alliance's research, which has been scrutinized amid increased interest in the origins of the pandemic. The documents were released in connection with ongoing Freedom of Information Act litigation by The Intercept against the National Institutes of Health. The Intercept is making the full documents available to the public. Quote, "This is a roadmap to the high-risk research that could have led to the current pandemic," said Gary Ruskin, executive director of U.S. Right to Know, a group that has been investigating the origins of COVID-19. Now, as much as, I'm not a fan of The Intercept, and people like Glenn Greenwald, the actual founder of it, would be critical of them, I will absolutely give them respect for doing the investigation, publishing the information, and letting us read the documents for ourselves. As much as it may seem like that's not the angle they were going for, at the very least, we're getting what we can only hope to be the truth. And I say that because it's really hard to know what's true these days. But these documents speak to a lot of what's going on. One of the grants, titled Understanding the Risk of Bat Coronavirus Emergence, outlines an ambitious effort led by EcoHealth Alliance President Peter Daszak to screen thousands of bat samples for novel coronaviruses. The research also involved screening people who work with live animals. The documents contain several critical details about the research in Wuhan, including the fact that key experimental work with humanized mice was conducted at a biosafety level 3 lab at Wuhan University Center for Animal Experiment, and not at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, as was previously assumed. The documents raise additional questions about the theory that the pandemic may have begun in a lab accident, an idea that Daszak has aggressively dismissed. The bat coronavirus grant provided the EcoHealth Alliance with a total of $3.1 million, including $599,000 that the Wuhan Institute of Virology used in part to identify and alter bat coronaviruses likely to infect humans. Even before the pandemic, many scientists were concerned about the potential dangers associated with such experiments. The grant proposal acknowledges some of those dangers. Fieldwork involves the highest risk of exposure to SARS or other COVs, while working in caves with high bat density overhead and the potential for fecal dust to be inhaled. Alina Chan, a molecular biologist at the Broad Institute, said the documents show that the EcoHealth Alliance has reason to take the lab leak theory seriously. In this proposal, here's a quote. In this proposal, they actually point out that they know how risky this work is. They keep talking about people potentially getting bitten, and they kept records of everyone who got bitten, Chan said. Does EcoHealth have those records? And if not, how can they possibly rule out a research-related accident? According to Richard Ebright, a molecular biologist at Rutgers University, the documents contain critical information about the research done in Wuhan, including about the creation of novel viruses. Quote, the viruses they constructed were tested for their ability to infect mice that were engineered to display human-type receptors on their cell, Ebright wrote to The Intercept after reviewing the documents. Ebright also said that the documents make it clear that 2 different types of novel coronaviruses were able to infect humanized mice. While they were working on SARS-related coronavirus, they were carrying out a parallel project at the same time on MERS-related coronavirus, Ebright said, referring to the virus that causes Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome. Asked about the grant materials, Robert Kessler, communications manager at EcoHealth, said, "We applied for grants to conduct research. The relevant agencies deemed that to be important research and thus funded it. So I don't know that there's a whole lot to say." The grant was initially awarded for a 5-year period from 2014 to 2019. Funding was renewed in 2019, but suspended by the Trump administration in April 2020. The closest relative of SARS-CoV-2, which causes COVID-19, is a virus found in bats, making the animals a focal point for efforts to understand the origin of the pandemic. Exactly how the virus jumped to humans is the subject of heated debate. Many scientists believe it was a natural spillover, meaning that the virus passed to humans in a setting such as a wet market or rural area where humans and animals are in close contact. Biosafety experts and internet sleuths who suspect a lab origin, meanwhile, have spent more than a year poring over publicly available information and obscure scientific publications looking for answers. In the past few months, leading scientists have also called for a deeper investigation of the pandemic's origins, as has President Joe Biden, who in May ordered the intelligence community to study the issue. On August 27th, Biden announced that the intelligence inquiry was inconclusive. Biden blamed China for failing to release critical data, but the U.S. government has also been slow to release information. The Intercept initially requested the proposals in September of 2020. Quote, "I wish this document had been released in early 2020, said Alina Chan, who has called for an investigation of the lab leak origin. It would have changed things massively just to have all the information in one place, immediately transparent in a credible document that was submitted by EcoHealth Alliance." The second grant, Understanding Risk of Zoonotic Virus Emergence in Emerging Infectious Diseases Hotspots of Southeast Asia, was awarded in August 2020 and extends through 2025. The proposal, written in 2019, often seems prescient, focusing on scaling up and deploying resources in Asia in case of an outbreak of an emergent infectious disease, or EID, and referring to Asia as the hottest of the EID hotspots. Now, quoted in the article is Richard H. Ebright, verified on Twitter, Board of Governors, professor of chemistry and chemical biology at Rutgers University, certainly an expert. He goes on to quote some of the article before saying, "The materials show that the 2014 and 2019 NIH grants to EcoHealth, with subcontracts to the Wuhan Institute of Virology, funded gain-of-function research as defined in federal policies in effect in 2014 through 2017, and potential pandemic pathogen enhancement as defined in federal policies in effect in 2017 till present." He says, "This has been evident previously from published research papers that credited the 2014 grant and from the publicly available summary of the 2019 grant. But this now can be stated definitively from progress reports of the 2014 grant and the full proposal of the 2017 grant. The materials confirm the grants supported the construction in Wuhan of novel chimeric SARS-related coronaviruses that combined a spike gene from one coronavirus with genetic information from another coronavirus and confirmed the resulting viruses could infect human cells. The materials reveal that the resulting novel laboratory-generated SARS-related coronaviruses also could infect mice engineered to display human receptors on cells, humanized mice. The materials further reveal for the first time that one of the resulting novel laboratory-generated SARS-related coronaviruses, one not been previously disclosed publicly, was more pathogenic to humanized mice than the starting virus from which it was constructed, and thus not only was reasonably anticipated to exhibit enhanced pathogenicity, but indeed was demonstrated to exhibit enhanced pathogenicity. The materials further reveal that the grants all supported the construction in Wuhan of novel chimeric MERS-related coronaviruses that combined spike genes from one MERS-related coronavirus with genetic information from another MERS-related coronavirus. The documents make it clear that assertions by the NIH director, Francis Collins, and the NIAID director, Anthony Fauci, that the NIH did not support gain-of-function research or potential pandemic pathogen enhancement at the Wuhan Institute of Virology are untruthful. To break that down in layman's terms, my friends, Richard Ebright, professor at Rutgers University, chemistry and chemical biology, is saying, upon reviewing the documents, that we can definitively say NIH director Francis Collins and NIAID Director Anthony Fauci were untruthful in speaking about whether or not they funded gain-of-function research. That is to say, the documents show they did fund gain-of-function research. Now, we know this because we have seen the documents. When Rand Paul questioned Dr. Fauci and he cited a report on this research, and Fauci said it was determined up and down the chain not to have been gain-of-function research. Semantics. Could you imagine trying that argument in a criminal trial? Could you imagine a working class or poor American saying, you're incorrect about whether I committed a theft? Theft is clearly defined as taking an object in which doesn't belong to you from its rightful owner. What we did at the mall was pick up objects and carry them across the threshold and out of the building. Clearly different. Yeah. Just arguing the exact same thing in a different framing doesn't change the fact that you did this. So what was Fauci's argument? Well, they said the research we were doing wasn't gain of function, so it wasn't. But it was. But it literally was. And Rand Paul, he outright defined how the federal government says, what is gain of function. And that's what we can see from Richard H. Ebright, that this work being done fits the federal definition. Or I should say the Intercept's reporting shows this. Now, my respect to the Intercept for doing the work. Let's take a look at how the media handled things. From Snopes, May 28th. Did Fauci fund gain-of-function research, thereby causing the COVID-19 pandemic? And there it is. They say statements made by Fox News host Tucker Carlson furthered theories that a manipulated virus spilled over from a lab in Wuhan. But let me explain how they played this game. The claim. The NIH director, Anthony Fauci, helped fund gain-of-function research at a facility in Wuhan, and that research ultimately led to the COVID-19 pandemic. Unproven. Context. The claim he's responsible for it. You see, what Snopes does is they jam a bunch into one fact check and ultimately don't actually break down the claims that are being made. Let me show you. First, did Fauci fund gain-of-function research? Stop. Yes or no? It's an important question. It's one that Rand Paul asked. Now, of course, many people have insinuated that because Fauci did fund it and then the lab leak happened, they believe it did. That proves the origin and it proves responsibility in Fauci. But let's slow down there. I'm not going to make those assertions. I'm going to say this. Did Fauci fund gain-of-function research? Yes. The Intercept has now basically proven that beyond a reasonable doubt by showing the progress reports of gain-of-function research. It's not just the one document Rand Paul held up that said, here's the research, here's the gain-of-function research. In these documents from the Intercept, it actually shows the progress, the grant proposals, what they were trying to do, what they were asking to do, and that it was gain-of-function research. Now, did that lead to the COVID-19 pandemic? Well, there's a whole other question. Is the virus that's going around leaked from the lab? Well, we got to find evidence of that one. That's a bit different. But Snopes combines it into one claim so they can effectively say it's unproven whether or not Fauci did fund it. Take a look at this. This is from the Washington Post. Going back to, what's the date on this one? May 18th. Fact-checking the Paul Fauci flap over Wuhan lab funding. So this is where they basically get into the facts, what was actually said. The Pinocchio test. They say there is some smoke here, but we do not yet perceive the fire claimed by Paul. To some extent, all money is fungible, but the EcoHealth funding was not related to the experiments. Wrong. But the collection of samples. Wrong. The NIH grant includes language that some say suggests gain-of-function research. NIH says it's a misinterpretation. Paul's statements about Barrick's research also appear overblown. We wavered between 2 and 3 Pinocchios, but decided on 2 because there still are enough questions about the work in the Wuhan lab to warrant further scrutiny, even if the NIH connection to possible gain-of-function research papers appears so far to be elusive. 2 Pinocchios. So Fauci denied it. Rand Paul then challenged him again later, saying, you lied. Will you retract your statements? And Fauci says, no. We know he was lying because he was the guy who was in charge of this. Apparently in the leaked emails, Fauci's emails, he asked when COVID happened, was this one of ours or something to that effect? So I don't understand how we come to this point now. Senator Rand Paul Fauci not being honest about a Wuhan lab funding and COVID origins from July 22nd. We also have this story from July 21st. Justice Department should pursue criminal referral against Fauci. Okay, Rand Paul's been moving forward. He's got a new statement that he just made recently. But let's take a look first, because I wanted to understand something. You see, when I was researching this, I said, okay, did Fauci commit perjury? Do you have to be under oath? You don't. If you lie to Congress, you have committed perjury. If you lie to the government, you've committed perjury. Now, there's some interesting language here. Well, so I pulled up this article from CNBC in 2016 to break down what is the crime, and then I'll read for you what Rand Paul has to say. CNBC says, what happens if you lie to Congress? July 7th, 2016. What are the rules about lying to Congress? Glad you asked. So this is, they say House Oversight and Government Reform Committee Jason Chaffetz went so far as to tell Comey, blah, 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 later in the hearing. With the request all but now guaranteed, CNBC broke down the consequences of lying. If you are testifying in front of Congress sometime soon and are wondering how far you can bend the truth, there are two key statutes governing perjury you need to be aware of. U.S. Code Section 1621 and 1001 of Title 18. Section 1621 covers general perjury and stipulates that anyone who willfully and contrary to such an oath states or subscribes any material matter which he does not believe to be true is guilty of perjury and shall be fined or imprisoned up to 5 years or both. Now, that's a challenge. For one, that section says under oath, and you have to know what you're saying is not true. How do you prove that someone didn't make a mistake? Which is why perjury is rarely ever prosecuted. Section 1001 covers false statements more generally, without requiring an oath. The section stipulates that whoever in any matter with the jurisdiction of the executive, legislative, or judicial branch of the government of the United States knowingly and willfully falsifies or conceals information, including before a congressional committee's inquiry, may also be fined or imprisoned up to 5 years. What potential punishment would someone who lied to Congress face? If you paid attention during the last section, you may have read that general perjury comes with a maximum 5-year prison sentence and potential fine. The same basically goes for not telling the truth to Congress, even without an oath. However, if the lie under Section 1001 involves terror, the maximum prison sentence rises to 8 years. Who has ever lied to Congress? Well, they go on to mention stuff I'm not super concerned about. This story is from 2016, so let's see the latest. From Fox News, Rand Paul says new Wuhan documents show Fauci lied. Fauci has adamantly denied that the NIH funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan. You'd think now that we have the evidence, something would be done about this guy, Fauci. Rand Paul says newly public documents revealed the extent of U.S. funding of coronavirus research in Wuhan, in China, show the NIAID head, Dr. Fauci, lied during previous testimony to Congress. Fauci has adamantly denied that they've provided this. Rand Paul says, surprise, surprise, Fauci lied again. And I was right about his agency funding novel coronavirus research at Wuhan. Read this thread in the papers released. Paul's tweet followed a story in the Intercept that revealed the U.S. government pumped $3.1 million into American health organization EcoHealth Alliance to back bat coronavirus research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And what were they doing? Constructing and altering, creating chimeric viruses, and purposefully increasing infectivity. I believe I have the story for you. This is discovery of a rich gene pool of bat SARS-related coronaviruses provides new insights into the origin of SARS. This is from journals.plos.org. As you can see, NewsGuard certified across the board except for not labeling their advertising. In the paper, they say construction of recombinant viruses. Recombinant viruses with the S gene of the novel virus of the backbone, blah, 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 were constructed using reverse genetic system, yada, yada. The chimeric viruses were rescued as described. Now, in this document, they actually go on to mention funding provided by the National Institutes of Health, NIAID. And there it is. Rand Paul cited this initially. Yet still, Fauci claimed it wasn't true. Well, now we have even more evidence. Do we expect anything to happen to these people like Fauci? Why would we? Why would he face any accountability for lying to Congress? The system is broken. The states are pulling apart from each other. People are cheering for the detainment of their political adversaries and the arrest of their political opponents. What can you expect? Now, Glenn Greenwald is the founder of The Intercept, and his comments on this report are actually very interesting considering what's going on politically. Glenn Greenwald says, this is amazing. In July, The Intercept had one of its most dishonest partisan hacks basically call Rand Paul a liar and deranged conspiracy theorist over and over for suggesting Fauci-funded research that could have caused the pandemic. But yesterday, the very same Intercept admits it sought documents about Fauci-funded research by EcoHealth, Peter Daszak's group, that raised additional questions about the theory the pandemic may have begun in a lab accident. Specifically, the documents the Intercept sought, which I'll bet any amount of money they thought would debunk Paul and vindicate Fauci, instead did the opposite. The docs more than ever link Daszak's research to possible COVID origins. Even when they accidentally do reporting that undermines liberal political causes, Intercept editors have to make sure they stay loyal. They admit that Daszak's highly risky research was funded by NIAID, but never once mentioned the name Fauci, the director of that agency. Glenn says, and by the way, this is why I also found irrational. This is why I also found irrational and incomprehensible the insistence by some on the left that the lab leak theory shouldn't be investigated, even if it's true, due to fears of stoking Cold War hatred of China. The research was also U.S. funded and led. One person says Daszak originated the open letter that set the tone for the entire media dismissal of lab leak theory as a conspiracy. Why he is not more infamous is beyond me. I rarely see his name. He is a primary villain in this tale. Glenn says exactly. It was Daszak who spearheaded the Lancet letter very early on in the pandemic to mock and dismiss the possibility that the virus could have leaked from a lab, insisting it was zoonotic, knowing that it was his Fauci-funded research at risk. One last point on the politics. I never thought it should matter. We should know either way how COVID started, obviously. But I always found the U.S.-China lab leak theory far less inflammatory than assuming it came from the eating habits of the Chinese. Anyway, whatever their motives were, and however flagrantly they went out of their way to avoid even mentioning the name Fauci, despite how central he is to the story, the Intercept just did more to advance the lab leak theory than anyone in months. Read this thread from R. Ebright about what these new documents published today by the Intercept show about Fauci, EcoHealth Alliance, and what we now know about the origins of COVID. And so that was kind of the point I was making, that even though the Intercept has these huge documents, the meat and potatoes ain't there. I think a report of this magnitude should have also included in the end that a report like this and statements from experts call into question statements made by Dr. Anthony Fauci to Congress as he was testifying about potential lab leak theory, COVID, and gain-of-function research. They didn't do that. But you know what? I'm not convinced entirely that it matters because we got the information we needed and the FOIA request is there. Now, there's some bigger questions outside of all of this. If we don't believe, if we do believe that Fauci will not face any accountability, if we think nothing will happen of this, what do we do? What do we as American citizens do? We need to go out and vote. That's for one thing. People don't want to feel they want you demoralized. We've got the midterms coming up. Now, this is over a year away from the midterms, so that's practically an eternity. But let this be something that rings true for all of you. How the media lied, how Fauci lied, how he lied over and over again. And here we are at a point where we're supposed to take his word for all of this, that he still brought up on TV and asked questions. Why? The tribal nature of this country. And that's a very, very serious problem. So what do we do? As I often say, get ready to vote. If you live in one of these, I'll tell you this. I don't care where you live. I don't care if you're in blue, red, deep red, whatever, middle of the road. You make sure you remain politically active. You go out and politely and calmly advocate for you believe and who you think would be the better leader. Make sure you're well informed. Read up on the causes you're so concerned about. Concerned about critical race theory? You better actually read some of it. Figure out who the authors are and then talk correctly to people who are confused. Look, I mentioned in a previous segment going on Russell Brand's podcast. And when I was on his podcast, I talked about critical race theory. And he says, can you explain to us what that is for people who aren't familiar? Absolutely. Because I've made the mistake of being unable to do it before, because my concern has always been the overarching wokeness, not the nitty gritty of Kimberly Crenshaw and Derek Bell's commentary from civil rights movement and things like that. No, we used critical race theory as a catch-all for general wokeism, but it ignored a lot of other aspects. And then when you couldn't properly define it definitively, like as per the definition, well, then it makes for a bad argument. You look foolish. So here's what we do. Make sure you actually know before you just say something. Maybe you'll hear someone say like critical race theory in schools, and then you'll go out and say the same thing. Someone will say, explain it. You'll be like, I can't. Then maybe you should read a little bit about it. Maybe you can write down some notes or save some articles in your phone. But you always have to be nice, friendly, peaceful, persuasive, and resourceful. Because I'll tell you this, they're panicking about 2022. There's already been Democrat activists saying, this is it, we're going to lose. Oh, no. If the Republicans get in, what are they going to do? No, more importantly, if the right-wing populists get in, what are they going to do? If enough right-wing populists win, they might impeach Joe Biden. I think they should, for all the Ukraine dealing stuff and the Chinese business deals, all that crazy stuff his kid was doing. It all should be highlighted, pointed out, and he should be investigated over it. You want to investigate Trump for some of this stuff? Well, Biden's got way more under his belt, so how about we do that? Yeah. That's going to mean that there's going to be Republican primaries. Pay attention. Tell your friends. Get active. Get in politics, man. And get your friends to vote. That's what's going to change things. And the other thing you can do is just build culture. You know, Daryl Davis, one of the smartest things I've heard in a while. I was talking to Chloe Valdery last week on the Timcast IRL podcast, and she says, don't approach these people just to prove yourself right or to prove them wrong. Genuinely approach them to listen, to care about them, and to be friends. And you will find that is how you actually change hearts and minds. And it's brilliant. So that's what you should consider too. When you go out to meetings, when you go out to these school boards or whatever you're doing, don't yell at people, don't insult them, don't call them names. Just say, why don't we grab a coffee and we grab a bite to eat and we'll talk about stuff. You see the new Marvel movie that came out, just whatever you can to be friends. And listen and ask questions. The Socratic method. But for now, I think those of us that have been following this that already know what's happening, we want accountability. And you're going to get that accountability if you get good people in office. And I don't mean Republicans. I really don't. I mean people who care about this country and the world. And that's irrespective of political party. So I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.